Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I have 3 non-fiction books written by women about women that I want to talk about. I picked these books up at the library not so long ago, quite randomly actually. I haven't really planned on picking anything non-fiction up or anything like this actually. But I guess it turned out quite well because I was kind of in a mood reading kind of a way, and I just didn't really feel like sticking to the books I had at home or just to the TBRs I set myself. So I'm quite happy I read these, also because I think I really enjoy nonfiction lately, and I will definitely continue picking more nonfiction up. And without any further ramblings, let's start with the first one. And the first one I want to talk about is She Came to Slay by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. And this is the life and times of Harriet Tubman. So this is a short illustrated biography of Harriet Tubman, and it is such a great way to get introduced to Harriet. I think this is the perfect book if you, as I, don't know anything about or didn't know much about Harriet Tubman before reading this. It's a great introduction to her and her life and her work. Harriet Tubman was one of the greatest conductors of the Underground Railroad. Born as a slave in the South, she escaped, went north, and then she went back several times on her own to help escape slaves, mostly her family, but also whoever she encountered and she could help on the way. And then she went back to the north and she participated in the Civil War, where she was kind of hired as a spy, but when she ended up there down south, she was kind of used as a cook and as a nurse. But I think she did a lot of different things, and it's just interesting to see how she participated and how she did everything in her power to fight for fighting against slavery. She was also an activist, and she worked hard for what she believed in for her entire life, and she didn't even get compensated for her work, for the work she did during the Civil War. And it's just such heartbreak and so difficult to read how hard it was for her, but how she never gave up and how she believed that this is what she has to do, and how she trusted herself and how she trusted God and how she trusted her instincts. This is one where it's really, you read it and you really detached from the story, you don't really get into it, but also because this is also, I think, written for a wide variety of age groups. I think also kind of children down to the age of 10 could read and understand this. So there's not much emotion put into this, but it is written as a matter of fact. It feels like historical fiction, and in a way, but it also feels like facts, and that this is what happened. I don't think there's a lot of interpretation in this. And then again, it is non-fiction, so it should not be any interpretation, but like it is presented a bit dryly in that sense. It feels like presenting the facts. It doesn't go deep into her family relations. It doesn't go deep into who she was. It mostly details her life, I guess. But you get a really clear idea of who she was as a person and what she did throughout her life. So I think after I read this, I will definitely pick up Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, which I have behind me on my shelf. I think it's about time to read that. But I would also like to maybe watch a movie. I think there's a movie called Harriet. I would also like to read maybe a fictionalized account of her life. I think that would be interesting. So I highly recommend this if you want to read something fast and you want to know more about who Harriet Tubman was. And I think, as I said, this is also great for children. So yes, I recommend this. And I think the author has written other similar books that I might pick up in the future. The next book I read was Dressed for a Dance in the Snow by Monika Zgustová. This was translated from Spanish by Julie Jones. I picked this one up because at the beginning of the year I read The Secrets We Kept by Laura Prescott, which in part was about a woman who is also mentioned in this book. So it is Olga Boris Pasternak's mistress, and he wrote Dr. Zhivago. So that kind of pulled me in because parts of that novel were about Olga and how she was sent to the Gulag for helping Boris Pasternak write Dr. Zhivago. And this one is particularly about women, and the author interviews 9 women who have survived the Gulag, and they tell their stories. So it was kind of interesting. I don't know a lot about the Soviet Union and what happened during Stalin's time, because I think in the span of a few decades, several million people died in the Gulag in the Soviet Union because they've done something which was considered anti-Soviet or was considered unpatriotic, or they were just connected to some people who might have done something, or maybe they just crossed the street where they shouldn't have. I mean, it feels almost like you were sent there for really trivial stuff because you stepped on someone's toe, basically. It was really, really a harsh system, and you never knew, it felt like you never knew. You had to be so careful because you could end up there for whatever, basically. And this is about these women who've been there and what they endured and how they survived and how they tell their stories and how they feel looking back that experience, they would not change that experience because that experience really made them who they are, which is kind of interesting because if you've experienced something, being in a concentration camp or being in a labor camp like this, where you had to work and where the work was almost pointless because they were sometimes making them like dig holes in the ground and just filling them up again, or like building walls and then just destroying them. So what was the point of all this? So these experiences shaped these women, and they felt like they didn't want to change that. So these are 9 stories, all of these women have survived the Gulag, but some of these stories feel like there are stories in the stories, because if some of these women have known someone important from Russia who they spent their time in the Gulag with, then they told that woman's story. So for example, one of these women tells Olga's story, and then another woman tells the famous actress's story, and then a third woman tells the famous poetess's story. So I don't really understand why was that necessary. I mean, if you as a Russian read this, then you might want to know about these famous people which are part of your history, and you want to know how their experiences in the Gulag was. But for someone, me, like reading it from a complete outsider's perspective, I just didn't understand why the focus was not more on those actual women's stories, and why was there a need to mention someone like a complete third party. But I guess it's just to show that maybe also as an elite, as part of the elite, as part of like the intellectual elite, you were not spared, and more so you were at danger because people would follow you, would listen to you. So it was really important to just keep quiet and just go along with things. It was such a hard and brutal regime, and I think in the future, I would like to read maybe a biography of one of these women and just get deeper into that experience, because this gave me an overview of that time of the reasons why these women specifically were sent there, and how they survived, and how the great Russian landscape was also very much part of their experience, and how that beauty was so harsh and unforgiving, but at the same time, it was the one thing which maybe kept them going. Because it's one of the things mentioned here is like someone tells one of these women is to keep in mind the beauty, look around you and see the beauty in the world, because maybe that's the only way you are going to survive. And how when our author, there are also pictures in this book, and how when the author goes to visit these women, a lot of their houses and their apartments are really filled with books, because books and I guess literature and just anything like that, music was what kept them going. And how sometimes there were books in these gulags, in these places, in these camps, which were read maybe 1,000 and 1,000 times over and over again. And I think that's just beautiful, but also heartbreaking at the same time. So as I said, I think it was a great introduction to that part of history. And as I mentioned, in the future, I would like to read a biography from the Gulag as well. And I'm really happy I picked this one up. And I think overall, I enjoyed it, but it was not the best in my opinion. Also because it feels like the author transcribed those interviews and didn't write with her own voice. She just transcribed them and just put them to paper, and that's it. So it really felt like an interview transcript, basically. The last book I read was Leftover in China, The Women Shaping the World's Next Superpower by Roseann. I didn't need more than the title and the subtitle to want to read this book when I saw it at the library, and I really wasn't disappointed. I think this book kept me captivated throughout, and even though it wasn't the perfect read, I really enjoyed it, and I think I got a lot out of it. I know about China a little bit and their one-child policy, of course, everyone knows about that. And what I guess people predict is what the scientists predict is that by 2020, actually this year, there will be more than 20 million more men in China than women. And this looks at those women who are now living a completely different life than that of their parents and grandparents, and how the one-child policy has changed society and has changed the role of women in society in China. So basically, because of the one-child policy, many parents decided to have, I guess, boys and to abort girls, and due to this there's gender imbalance in a lot of parts in China, but especially in the rural areas. And on the other hand, parents who have daughters or had daughters now spend more time and more money on their daughters' education, which in the past would not have been the case, because in the past maybe the money and the time and energy would have went to the boys, I guess. So now there's a lot of women in China who have grown up given all the privileges which previously were only given to boys. And they're really well-educated women, and they really don't see themselves living the same life as their parents. And they really don't want to get married maybe, or maybe at all. It's also because it's maybe harder to get married, because if you are educated, then you want to marry someone who is similarly educated as you. And maybe all the men who are in excess, I would say, or maybe all of them are in the provinces and they're not as highly educated, so maybe you wouldn't want to marry them. So I guess there's also difficult for some of these women to find a partner who is at the same level as they are. It has like a funny feel to it. It has almost like a Sex and the City vibe to it. It follows a few of these women. I think it's because the author as a journalist knew some of these women or just decided to focus on their stories a bit more. So even though it encompasses a lot and it gives you a great view of China, its history and where it's heading to in regards to this one-child policy and its consequences. But I think it also goes deeper into some specific women and their lives and their families. And it's just, I think it was fun, entertaining, but also knowledgeable at the same time, informational, I would say. So yeah, I would prefer to read something like this, maybe in the future written by a Chinese author, maybe going into more depth into a specific woman or a specific family, because I think it would be interesting to see, to follow a family and follow this generational gap. So I really loved how this was almost like Sex and the City, but in China, being about being single and being about marriage and all the things that these women's family would do to get them to marry finally, and the lengths these women's mothers would go to in order to just see their daughters married. I really love how it gives us insight into men and it gives also their point of view, but it also tells us that there are also leftover men in China. And as I mentioned previously, those men living in the rural areas and how hard it is for them to get married because there's just simply not enough women around. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I think it was very insightful, but at the same time, not too serious. So if you love books like TV shows like Sex and the City, but you want to also read about something or a different part of the world, a non-fiction which is easily accessible, and I think this would be a great one to pick up. So these are all the books that I read, which were about women, but also written by women. And I'm really happy that I read these. And if you have anything similar that you have read, please let me know in the comments below, because I would be really interested to read some more. I think non-fiction like this is really easy to read, and especially if you're not into non-fiction because you believe that it's very heavy and theoretical, then I think you just have not read the right non-fiction, because these are so easy, almost read like fiction. This is where I leave you now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.